Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem.
Good afternoon. You all look wonderful. Well, it is such an honor to be with all of you here today. My guess, thank you. Now listen. My guess is that a year ago, most of you had no idea who I was. But unlike the DC media, I'm sure that you all at least know that there are two Dakotas, and that I'm the governor of the warmer one. Now, I'm here today to share some of the lessons from my state. I think the main question that needs to be answered this weekend is, why does America need conservatives? Now, the question of why America needs conservatives can be answered by just mentioning one single year. And that year is 2020. Now, everybody knows that almost overnight, we went from a roaring economy to a tragic nationwide shutdown. By the beginning of 2020, President Trump had created 7 million new American jobs. We had the lowest unemployment rate in over half a century. And unemployment rates for Black, Hispanic, and Asian Americans reached the lowest levels in history. More than 10 million people had been lifted out of poverty and out of welfare. And all of that changed in March. Now, most governors shut down their states. What followed was record unemployment, businesses closed, most schools were shuttered, and communities suffered. And the U.S. economy came to an immediate halt. Now, let me be clear. COVID didn't crush the economy. Government crushed the economy. And then, just as quickly, government turned around and held itself out as the savior. And frankly, the Treasury Department can't print money fast enough to keep up with Congress's wish list. But not everyone has followed this path. For those of you who don't know, South Dakota is the only state in America that never ordered a single business or church to close. We never instituted a shelter-in-place order. We never mandated that people wear masks. We never even defined what an essential business is, because I don't believe that governors have the authority to tell you that your business isn't essential. Now, South Dakota schools are no different than schools everywhere else in America. But we approached the pandemic differently. From the earliest days of the pandemic, our priority was the students, their well-being, and their education. When it was time to go back to school in the fall, we put our kids in the classroom. Teachers, administrators, parents, and the students themselves were of one mind to make things work for our children. And the best way to do that was in the classroom. Now, in South Dakota, I provided all of the information that we had to our people, and then I trusted them to make the best decisions for themselves, for their families, and in turn, their communities. We never focused on the case numbers. Instead, we kept our eye on hospital capacity. Now, Dr. Fauci, he told me that on my worst day, I'd have 10,000 patients in the hospital. On our worst day, we had a little over 600. Now, I don't know if you agree with me, but Dr. Fauci is wrong a lot. even in a pandemic, public health policy needs to take into account people's economic and social well-being. Daily needs still need to be met. People need to keep a roof over their heads. They need to feed their families. And they still need purpose. They need their dignity. Now, my administration resisted the call for virus control at the expense of everything else. We looked at the science, the data, and the facts, and then we took a balanced approach. Truthfully, I never thought that the decisions that I was making were going to be unique. I thought that there would be more who would follow basic conservative principles, but I guess I was wrong. Ask yourself this question: how far will people go to enforce mask mandates? Once you start lockdowns, how long can you sustain them? In South Dakota, we had some cases in March and April, but the virus didn't really hit the Midwest until late fall. Should we have kept people in their homes from March onward? Of course not. It's important to ask these questions. We have to show people how arbitrary these restrictions are, and the coercion, the force, and the anti-liberty steps that governments take to enforce them. Often, the enforcement isn't based on facts. Justifying these mitigation efforts has been anything but scientific. Now, many in the media, they criticized South Dakota's approach. They labeled me as ill-informed, that I was reckless, and even a denier. Some even claimed that South Dakota was as bad as it gets anywhere in the world when it comes to COVID-19. That is a lie. The media did all of this while simultaneously praising governors who issued lockdowns, who mandated masks and shut down businesses, applauding them as having taken the right steps to mitigate the spread of the virus. At one point, I appeared on George Stephanopoulos' Sunday show. I don't know if you watched that. No, you don't? Shocker. He had just wrapped up a segment with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, where he asked Cuomo to give me some advice on how to deal with COVID. Now seems like a really good time to remind everyone of what Governor Cuomo was doing in New York. On March 25th, Cuomo ordered COVID patients into nursing homes, and he prohibited the staff from testing people before admitting them. 9 days later, he pushed legislation prohibiting nursing home lawsuits over COVID deaths. 6 days after that, he prohibited nursing homes from sending COVID patients to the nearby naval hospital ship or the field hospital, both of which were essentially empty. Now, 8 days after that, the first deaths started to show up. And on January 28th of this year, the New York Attorney General announced that Cuomo and his administration significantly undercounted the number of COVID-related deaths in nursing homes by as much as 50%. To make matters worse, they tried to cover it up. Now that is the media's COVID hero. And by the way, he also earned an Emmy, and he wrote a book on his COVID response. So who really needed the advice? Again, in South Dakota, we did things differently. We applied common sense and conservative governing principles. We never exceeded our hospital capacity, and our economy is booming. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation. We are number one in the nation for keeping jobs, keeping businesses open, and keeping money in the pockets of our people. The people of South Dakota kept their hours and their wages at a higher rate than workers anywhere else in the nation, and our schools are open. America needs conservatives at the state and at the local level, but we also need conservatives at the highest level of government too. In America, we have government of, by, and for the people. Our founding fathers established our national constitution, and the people of individual states crafted their own constitutions that place specific limits on the role of government. Those limits are essential to preventing government officials from trampling on people's rights. The people themselves are primarily responsible for their own health and their well-being. They are the ones who, entrusted with expansive freedoms, the free will to exercise their rights to work, worship, and to earn a living. No governor should ever dictate to their people which activities are officially approved or are not approved. And no governor should ever arrest, ticket, or fine people for exercising their freedoms. Governors and members of Congress and the President have a duty to respect the rights of the people who elected them. But it seems these days that conservatives are the only ones who know what that means. Personal responsibility is considered a God-given gift in South Dakota. Personal responsibility is not a term that conservatives have abandoned. When I was preparing to come speak with you, I came across some fascinating remarks that were made back in 1962. Listen to this. The Declaration, above all else, was a document not of rhetoric, but of bold decision. The Declaration unleashed not merely a revolution against the British, but a revolution in human affairs. This doctrine of national independence shook the globe, and it remains the most powerful force anywhere in the world today. That's fantastic, right? Those are the words of Democrat President John F. Kennedy. Is there any wonder why Ronald Reagan often said, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party, it left me"? There was a time when both political parties clung to certain fundamental principles. But today we seem not to even share the most basic ideals. America needs people who will stand up for these fundamental principles. America needs conservatives. It's easy to look back on 2020 and remember all of the issues that we had with COVID. But COVID is only one piece of a very problematic puzzle. It certainly showed us how deep the divide really is and how thin the barrier is between freedom and tyranny. But there was a worse movement that was happening in 2020, and it's an ongoing problem. Across America these last several months, we watched an organized, coordinated campaign to remove and eliminate all references to our nation's founding and many other parts of our history. Rather than looking to the past to help improve our future, some are trying to wipe away the lessons of history, lessons that we should be teaching to our children and to our grandchildren. Now, this approach focuses exclusively on our forefathers' flaws, and it fails to capitalize on the opportunity to learn from their virtues, and they had many of those. By discrediting the individuals who formed America's founding principles, they create doubt. And then they can remake America into a very different political image. It is our job to help explain why this is wrong. Remember, America wasn't founded for the personal gain or personal power of men like Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. The signers of the Declaration of Independence put their lives and their sacred honor on the line, and they affirmed people's God-given freedoms. Still today, the Declaration of Independence is one of the most important statements of purpose ever written. And not just because it serves as the justification for our independence to the entire world, but also because it has led to our prosperity, and it's inspired many other nations and peoples to seek freedom. We the people have consented to a government that will serve all of us equally, a government that will protect and uphold our God-given rights, as well as the fundamental rights enumerated by our Constitution. It is our duty to renew our commitment to these ideals and to pass them on to those who come after us. These ideals cannot be dismissed as the opinions of flawed men. Our founders had their flaws, certainly. But to use those flaws to condemn their ideals and the greatest Constitution that the world has ever seen is both unjust and it's self-defeating. How many of us can even live up to our own ideals? Without the words, the beliefs, and the sacrifices of those few, the world would not have a ringing example of true freedom. To attempt to cancel the founding generation is an attempt to cancel our own freedoms. Let's always remember, America is good. Freedom is better than tyranny. We are unique. We are exceptional. And no American should ever, ever apologize for that. We should illustrate to the world that people thrive when government is limited, and people's ingenuity and their creativity is unleashed. We should also remind the world what happens when tyranny and oppression are allowed to thrive. These days, too many are embracing China, a nation that crushes freedom of speech and religion. China literally places religious minorities in internment camps. China responded to the COVID virus by trying to cover it up. And one of their mitigation strategies was to weld doors shut to lock families in their homes. Friends of China are not friends of freedom. Make no mistake, America's leadership is needed in the world. So now let's have a really candid conversation. Everyone in this room and those listening at home, they know that America needs leaders right now. Those leaders need wisdom. They need the confidence to stand up for our principles and a will to act. Those leaders need to be conservative. We have a lot of work to do in the coming months. What may have worked in the past is not good enough anymore. It's not enough to say, vote for us because your pocketbook will be bigger, or because we'll cut your taxes and reduce the regulations, or because we'll fight against abortion or Obamacare or whatever else. I'm not saying that these things aren't important. They are among the pillars of what we believe. But conservatives must lead the nation away from borrowing against our children's future. We must put an end to the accounting gimmicks used to deceive people. Joe Biden has been in politics for 50 years. At that time, our national debt was roughly $450 billion. Today, that's pretty close to what we pay in interest on our national debt. Everyone is to blame. We have forgotten principles that we once held dear. And we must more closely articulate to the American people that we are the only ones who respect them as human beings. That we are the only ones who believe the American people have God-given rights. We are not here to tell you how to live your life, how to treat you like a child or a criminal because you go to church or you defend yourself. Conservatives respect people as individuals. We don't divide people based on their religion, their culture, or the color of their skin. We don't shun people who think for themselves. And we understand that every single person is different. Each person deserves the opportunity to build his or her life without some self-important government bureaucrat telling them what they can or what they can't do. We don't have the media on our side. Conservatives must be smarter than progressives. We must know our history. We must know what works and what doesn't work. We must think through the issues, and make no mistake about it, conservatives exist to fight for America and for every single American. Now, for those of you who are disappointed about the election, I am too. Remember, incredible innovation, though, it took place after Goldwater's 1964 landslide loss. It took the creation of many institutions, including the American Conservative Union, the National Right to Life, the Heritage Foundation, the Manhattan Institute, Concerned Women for America, the Federalist Society, Family Research Council, and among others, it took many to change hearts and to change minds. It was institutions like these that helped bring about the Reagan Revolution and bring American exceptionalism back. Their work is more important today than ever before. So what can you do right now? It's really simple. You can be bold. You can show up. Debate these ideas. Persuade your neighbors. This pandemic illustrated that many politicians have a totally different vision for government than what the founders laid out. It was once said that the left takes its vision seriously, more seriously than it takes the rights of other people. They want to be our shepherds, but that requires us to be the sheep. Let it be heard loud and clear from us right now. We will not be sheep. So I'd like to close today with a story. My dad was a cowboy. He was the toughest person that I've ever known. Ever since I was a real little girl, I just wanted to grow up and be like him. Now, he died in an accident on our farm when I was 22 years old. And a couple months after he was killed, I finally got the courage to go out and clean out his pickup. Now, all of you who have a farmer or a rancher in your life, you know that they often live out of their pickups. Everything important can be found in the cab. Their wallet, bills to pay, tools, you name it. And if you need to find something important, every single one of us farmers' kids knows that the pickup is the first place that you look. Now, as the new general manager of the business, a couple of months after Dad died, I knew that where that pickup was, what was in it, and I needed to clean it out eventually. But those months had also been filled with hundreds and hundreds of questions. What seed should we be planting? What field should we plant first? What's the price that we need to sell our calves for to cash flow the cattle operation? And I didn't have those answers. I remember wishing over and over again, if I could just ask Dad. If I could just ask Dad one more question. And frankly, I was running the business, but I was daily faking my way through it. I had no idea how we were going to keep our family business going without my dad. And I was determined, though, that we weren't going to fail. So that day, as I carried a box out to the pickup, I knew it was time to clean it out. I stuck my hand down into the console in the middle between the chairs in the front seat, and I started to put items in the box that I was taking out. So the first thing was a pliers. How many of you know what a pliers is? A Baby Ruth candy bar. I remember that was his favorite. Notebooks, pens, tools. And then I found a little tiny tape recorder. It was the kind of tape recorder that a doctor dictates into. I pushed the play button, and immediately I heard my dad's voice. He was talking about seed corn varieties, which ones had performed well on certain fields that we owned that went with certain soil types. He spoke about how we'd had such a wet year the year before that resulted in poor crop yields and damaged grain. We had had a tough harvest, and he went on to describe what kind of variety choices he would have made differently, what he thought might work better for the spring that we were anticipating ahead. My eyes started to fill up with tears as I realized I was learning information that was going to be helpful to me in making crop decisions. I looked down into the console, and I saw several more tapes, almost a dozen of them in all. And one by one, I put them in the tape recorder sitting there in that pickup, and I listened to my dad's voice talk about the cows, weather, markets, and what to do if we were ever caught in a tough financial situation. Inside those tapes were the answers to so many of the questions that I had had over the past several months. Over and over again, I had said, if I could just ask Dad. And here in my hands were all the answers that I needed, straight from him in his voice in the palm of my hand. Now, in that moment, I felt a strange sort of peace settle over me. I know Scripture talks about a peace that passes all understanding. It was almost at that moment as if God was saying to me, I will provide. Stop worrying. You will be okay. Your family will be okay. I've got this. I had the answers. I just needed to get to work. Now, Dad was always the hardest worker that I knew. He led by example and he led by action. But that day, what changed everything was his words. I made a decision that day to be like my dad. A person of words, but a person of action. Because both matter. That's why I ran for office. My mission is to make South Dakota a better place to live, to do business, and to raise a family. One of the reasons I care so deeply about these issues is because I want these things for my family and for every single American family. I believe South Dakota has been an example to the nation this past year. People used personal responsibility to protect their family's health and their way of life, while the government respected their rights and their freedom. And we are working together to create new opportunities and a better future for our kids. We took the American path. Let me close with this. As conservatives, we often forget that stories are much more powerful than facts and statistics. Our stories need to be told. It is the only way that we will inspire and motivate the American people to preserve this great country. We must go into this fight for freedom with our eyes wide open, educated to the tactics the liberals will use, yet totally pure in our motives. This isn't about us. It's about our children and their future. It's about the nation that we're going to pass on to them. It's about telling their stories over and over that remind us why America needs conservatives now more than ever. So thank you for all that you do. America is blessed to have you on her side. God bless each and every one of you, and may God bless the United States of America. We have built roads, bridges, dams, and even a railroad. Who builds railroads anymore? South Dakota does. We do. We put high-speed internet access across the entire state. We have the highest birth rate in the nation. People have hope. People are having babies, and I love it. We do not have an income tax. We have no personal property tax, and last year we passed the largest tax cut in our state's history by lowering our sales tax to 4.2%. Now, we are one of the few states whose suicide rates and our mental health challenges are going down. And we have the lowest drop in overdoses the last couple of years as well. What does all this say? This says that our people are happier. And they're happier because they're free. Leadership matters. I'm just going to say it. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they suck. And, to be honest with you, we shouldn't look to Congress for the answers either. The gridlock on Capitol Hill is not going to break in time to save America. We need a president who will. And I have always believed and supported the fact that our next president needs to be President Trump.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Congressman Johnson. It is an honor to be here. I was ready for some kind of a joke or something I had to respond to, but thank you very much for that kind introduction. I've enjoyed watching you serve in the seat that represents South Dakota here, and you've done so with distinguished honor. So I appreciate all of your service to our state and our people. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Westerman and Ranking Member Grijalva and the members of the committee. It's my honor to be with all of you today. In fact, my former Chief of Staff just gave me my old nameplate from this committee when I had the chance to serve with all of you, which is incredibly special to me. I would put it up here today and use it, except for I don't get the chance to sit where you sit today. This is not a decision that I will get the chance to make. This is something that has congressional authority, and you need to act in order to protect our people and to protect our freedom. Today, I sit in front of you as a governor and as a former farmer and rancher and someone who recognizes the deep devastation that if this proposed rule were to go forward, how hard it would be on our people and what it means for our nation far into the future. I remember vividly my time serving here on this committee. And I remember fondly working with many of you who sat on this committee with me as well during that time and the good work we were able to do in preserving our natural resources. Today, as the current governor of the great state of South Dakota, I want to direct my comments specifically to a piece of legislation that you are debating and considering, H.R. 3397. This legislation would require the Director of the Bureau of Land Management to withdraw a rule relating to conservation and landscape health. This rule is just one of many that highlights an example of overreaching, unelected bureaucracy attempting to perpetuate radical environmental policies that ignore common sense. They ignore stewardship practices that have been practiced on our land for generations, while allowing multiple uses of this precious resource to strengthen America and our people. We have doing that for many, many years. In my written testimony, which I've submitted today to you, Mr. Chairman, I list several specific reasons why this rule would be so devastating for our people in South Dakota and for our economy. Why I think it is impossible for them to move forward with this and to responsibly conserve our land. I encourage all of you to read that written testimony. It goes into much more detail. In addition to my testimony today, I've joined a letter with other governors, with governors of Utah, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, and my friend sitting here with me today, Governor Mark Gordon of Wyoming. He's a voice, and they all voice concerns with the Biden administration directly on this proposed rule. Like many of you, land conservation for our family isn't just a theory. It's the way that we have lived for many, many generations. I was raised by a dad who often reminded me, Kristi, we don't sell land because God's not making any more land. From the time I was a young girl, I listened to him talk about soil types. I listened to him talk about the importance of native ground, conservation practices, and management decisions. I learned the scientific data and the research of what it took to operate on that land and to protect it, but I also learned why he cared so much. Because working the land wasn't just a job or a career to my father. It was our family legacy. It was our way of life. It was a culture that not only preserves a critical work ethic that is so important to this country, but it also reminded us daily of the natural resources that were a gift from God. As I grew older, I learned more about the importance of keeping all areas of our country productive. To help stabilize the economy, every part of our nation needs to produce, and that would help us during very difficult economic times. I also learned how critical it was to be energy independent, how important it was to protect our nation's food supply and to produce our own food. Now, when I was elected governor, I selected a fellow rancher as my lieutenant governor. His name was Larry Roden, and to our knowledge, we are the only governor and lieutenant governor in the history of the nation that both spent our lives making a living from agriculture. We're very proud of that, and we understand as well as anyone that our farmers and our ranchers care about our land. They are stewards. We care about preserving it to pass it on to our kids and to our grandkids. My experience in business and in public office and national security issues has reaffirmed my belief that our enemies and those who hate the United States of America may never need to fire a shot to take us over. They may not need to. We are going to be surrendering our freedom by becoming more dependent on them for our critical needs, for gas, oil, food, medicine, and more. When a country controls our food supply and our energy supply, they will control us, and American freedom will be gone. We cannot allow rules like this to move forward in a way that stops productivity and it stops American independence. Nearly 98% of BLM surface lands in South Dakota are grazed by permittees. Grazing is an important conservation strategy in South Dakota. We also host 76 active producing oil and gas wells and 36,762 acres. These acres provide outdoor recreation opportunities, including hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, and more, and we must maintain public access in order for these lands to benefit both South Dakota residents and visitors. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm smart, and I realize I'm out of time, and you've got a tight schedule. But I've got much more I'd like to share with the committee today on what specifically is wrong with this rule and why it doesn't work, the redundancy in it, the unnecessary burden it creates, how it stops productivity. And the number one concern for me is that conservation is already incredibly a part of every single management practice that happens on BLM land. To go out there and to create a mechanism such as a conservation lease that could be bought by third parties, not even necessarily by people in our own country, and give them access and authority over these lands, it's dangerous. It's not just dangerous to those that are out there working the land. It's dangerous to our economy. It's dangerous to our energy independence, our producing our own food supply. It's dangerous to America. Thank you so much, Representative Curtis, for bringing this piece of legislation. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
Thank you, Governor.
In fact, until South Dakota refused, and was the only state that refused to issue any lockdowns, I don't know if political leaders even realized that there was another option. I was shocked at how quickly people gave up their freedoms. Politicians closed churches, so people willingly gave up their freedom of religion. Politicians said you couldn't gather in groups, so people willingly gave up their freedom of assembly. Politicians worked with social media companies to stifle dissent, so people willingly gave up their freedom of speech. I think the American people could learn a thing or two from the NRA. This is not a group of people who give up their God-given constitutional rights willingly. During the pandemic, I spent a lot of time outdoors. Sometimes you just needed a break from the fear and the paranoia that was going on TV and in all the newspapers. My family would often go and relax at a cabin, go fishing, go pheasant hunting. One day I made a video of me shooting a pheasant. I don't know if you've seen it. I had turned to the camera after shooting a bird and said, "Less COVID, more hunting." And the liberals melted down on me. I was a little embarrassed by that video, though, because it took me 3 shots to drop that bird. Obviously, I was a little out of practice. I was making fun of myself. I needed more hunting. It wasn't my best day shooting, and I shouldn't have been surprised when PETA and all the liberal media came unglued and came after me. They couldn't believe that I would say less COVID, more hunting. I was kind of confused by it. Did they want more COVID or less hunting? But since then, we've had less COVID, so thank God. And we've had plenty of more hunting. In fact, South Dakota has the best pheasant hunting in the world. And if you haven't come to enjoy it with us, then you should. But South Dakota's greatest asset is our people. Our state motto is, "Under God, the people rule." And while enduring many challenges over the last several years, we have worked together to turn those challenges into opportunities. Our state is thriving as a result of embracing liberty and personal responsibility. We're setting the standard as the most Second Amendment-friendly state in the nation. The very first bill that I signed as governor guarantees constitutional carry for all law-abiding South Dakotans. I signed legislation to block state and local governments from being able to use an emergency declaration as an excuse to infringe on Second Amendment rights. We strengthened our Stand Your Ground law. We updated the definition of a loaded firearm to mean that if a round is chambered, making it easier to respond in situations when seconds count. And we made South Dakota the first state in America to not charge a fee for any concealed carry permit. In fact, we now even pay for your federal background check. It will not cost you a penny to exercise your Second Amendment rights in South Dakota. While leadership in Washington, D.C. fails to deliver meaningful solutions for the nation, our state will take action. South Dakota enjoys the strongest economy in the country, the lowest unemployment, and unprecedented economic growth. Make no mistake, freedom generated those blessings. Winston Churchill once said, "Never give in, never, 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 except to convictions of honor and good sense." Well, here, my honor and good sense require me to continue to fight for freedom, and that's what I'll do.
There's been some inquiries about a meeting that you held last year. How was it appropriate to have that meeting with your daughter and key decision makers in her application at that time?
So will you tell the truth this time?
I'll say what you...
Will you?
Yeah.
Well, tell the truth of the story because I've been very clear and spoken to this before, and we've communicated with you directly that my daughter at no time received special treatment. In fact, she went through the same process several others did as well. But we all know that we are short of appraisers here in the state of South Dakota. And for years and decades, we've had people trying to buy houses or buy property, or realtors and bankers and even appraisers themselves that have said that the program in South Dakota needs to be fixed. I came in to fix the program. And so we are fixing it, but also we recognize that some people that have been involved in the industry for a long time don't like that, because the program before required that appraisers train their competition. And it limits their ability to put more dollars in their pocket. But regardless, we need appraisers, we need a fair system, and that's my determined goal. The one thing I'd appreciate is if you make sure that when you're quoting people in your stories, that you're vetting them, that you're making sure you're not only quoting one individual who's contributed to every single political opponent that I've had in the past, and that when we give you facts and give you people you can speak to print the facts, that you will choose to print that as well, especially when you've promised, and especially when your response back to us is completely unacceptable, that it's simply not newsworthy to print the facts. This story is been twisted and has been manipulated, and there's an agenda behind it, and I would appreciate it if our media would make sure that they're going forward and telling the truth and all the facts when they talk about them.
How is it appropriate to have that meeting? Multiple ethics experts have raised concerns.
And my Secretary of Labor answered all these questions, and that meeting was about fixing the appraiser program.
But that meeting also touched on your daughter's application for a
That
license.
meeting was there to talk about fixing the appraiser program and what we needed to do to make sure that we were going forward in a way that got us more appraisers in the state of South Dakota.
And that didn't raise any ethical concerns for you?
To talk about fixing a
To
program
have your daughter
that
in the
needed to
meeting
be
with key
fixed?
decision makers?
She was there speaking to the program.
And her license was pending before the program?
No, the decision was already made on her path forward, and let me be clear, Stephen, and print this. She went through the exact same process that other appraisers did in the state of South Dakota. She at no time received special treatment.
So were you aware that an agreement had been reached before the meeting?
We didn't even talk about that. So,
Your Secretary of Labor said that you talked about it,
talked about her, my daughter?
her application during the meeting.
We could, but the program was talked about at that day, how we were going to reform the program. The meeting was not to discuss her.
But your Secretary of
She
Labor
gave her
said,
personal experiences through the program. Of course, she gave her perspective and how long it took to go through the program and how difficult it was. But I would also challenge you to go talk to other people in the state that have indicated for years. We have letters of the entire Congressional delegation that have said that this appraiser program here in the state of South Dakota was a problem, but also in the country, and that it needed to be fixed. So for years, even when I was in Congress, people would travel to Washington, D.C. to ask me if there's anything I could do to help fix the appraiser program here in the state of South Dakota. So it's been a program that has long been broken, and it has limited the amount of appraisers, which drives up costs for families here and makes it very difficult to do day-to-day business.
why?
And she makes sure you focus on the fact that my daughter was not treated differently. She at no time received special treatment. She went through the same process that several other individuals in the state went through.
So if any of those other individuals had requested a meeting with your Labor Secretary and yourself and the head of the
I
department,
meet
you would
with
have
people
accommodated
every
that?
single day. In fact, I bet I've had 7 or 8 meetings with individuals in the state of South Dakota just today.
Have you had
So-
any regarding their appraiser application?
Yes, many. Why, do you think I go into this without having conversations with people over the years about the program? Absolutely. I have for years. Anybody else?
When this,
Yes. Jim?
I'd just like to back you up a little bit here. I spent over 2 years working with Tom Hart in your office for a constituent who was having these same types of problems, except he was an experienced appraiser who, with the medical and so on, had to reapply, and it took him almost 2.5 years. He happens to be a committee man of the other party who said he would speak to anyone in your defense on this and how broken that program has been.
Well, we have referred people to Stephen, and he's chosen not to write a story about the broken program because he said it was not newsworthy. Next.
Why would
I rise in support of House Bill 1075 to eliminate the sales tax on groceries. As you know, I am Governor Kristi Noem. I'm the 33rd governor of South Dakota. I'm also a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, and I have been a business person and a farmer and rancher my entire life. As most of you may know, but maybe need to be reminded, I've spent my entire life in public office focused on tax policy. When I was here in the legislature, I worked on bills to reform our property tax system here in the state so it'd be more equitable and treat our property tax owners fairly, and we had accurate assessments going forward. When I went to Congress and represented all of you in Washington, D.C., I served on the Ways and Means Committee, which most people would refer to as a committee that has the most ways it can be mean because it has jurisdiction over all taxes, healthcare policy, trade agreements. But there I made taxes and tax reform my priority. I focused for 2.5 years on doing a tax reform bill that we got across the finish line with our president that put $2,400 back in the pockets of every South Dakota family. I was proud of the fact that that tax reform bill brought relief to residents of South Dakota. A lot of people have asked me why I've chosen to bring a bill to all of you that would repeal the sales tax on grocery store items. That's because, again, this policy focuses specifically on residents. I know that Representative Mills said earlier that the tax cut on reducing the rate would help residents. It also helps every tourist that comes to the state. People that come to the state and spend their money, reducing the rate helps them, but it isn't focused specifically on residents, which is where my focus is. As governor, it's my job to get up every single day to look at the hardworking people who live here, who go and buy groceries, and see what I can do to help them keep more dollars in their pocket. In fact, we had a president, President Coolidge, at one time, said that the ability to take income or property from a person is just basically dictating how much and how long that person has to work for the government. Today, I'm going to ask if you would give the people of South Dakota less time that they have to work for the government and allow them to get a tax cut that will benefit them and their families. The other reason I've landed on this policy today that I brought to all of you to repeal the sales tax on groceries is because it helps everybody of all income levels. It doesn't pick winners and losers. It helps senior citizens on fixed incomes. It also helps single moms who may rent an apartment and have a tough time feeding their kids with the rising food costs that we have. In the last 2 years, we've seen food costs go up by 19%. It's been significant to see the inflation that has hit the people of this country. But South Dakota is thriving. We are in our strongest financial and economical position that we've been in our history. And that's because of sound fiscal policy, because of us taking our challenges that we faced the last few years and turning them into opportunities. The year before I was governor, our reserves in our account was $176.4 million is what we had in reserves. This last year, we had $422.6 million in reserves. Look at how much we have done to secure the state financially in the future. We have $400 million almost in excess surplus before we even approach a tax cut this year. That's a great position for South Dakota to be in, and it's there because we've made wise decisions. We have seen our reserves go up, we've seen our revenues go up, we've seen incomes in this state go up faster than anywhere else in the country. Our unemployment has been at historic lows because people are working, because we were the only state in the country that turned down elevated unemployment benefits, and we've continued to see our housing development lead the nation because people want to live here. They want to live here and they want to be free. I would ask today that you would support this tax cut. It's a $102 million tax cut for the people of South Dakota because it is focused on them. I had several people over the last several weeks ask me, Governor, why are you asking for this sales tax cut? Why do you want to focus on groceries? And do people even want that? I'm not hearing about it from my districts. So we went out and conducted recent polling, which I think most of you have probably seen over the weekend. I wrote an op-ed on it also talking about why this policy is the right tax cut for the right time for the people of South Dakota. We had over 75% of the people of this state that say, out of the 3 tax proposals you have in front of you today, they want the sales tax on groceries repealed. Overwhelming support in this state for people to get relief because they recognize that it helps people of all income levels. It helps the residents who live here and get up and go to work every single day. And because food costs are so escalating in this environment that they need relief to make sure that they can make their budgets work every single week. In fact, out of those people that were polled, they were 81% more likely to support this tax cut when they learned that it helped people who were on fixed incomes. When they were asked if they recognized that this would help senior citizens who only get by on Social Security, they were much more likely, out of the 3 proposals in front of you today, to support repealing the sales tax on grocery items. Another 63% of them supported this proposal over all the others when they found out that we're one of only 7 states that still tax our groceries. We're in the minority here. And in fact, I think if you're going to look responsibly at the future, you'll recognize that in 2 years, you're going to have a ballot measure that will be on the ballot that the voters will decide. With this kind of support, it's going to pass. So if you pick a different tax cut to do this year of $104 million or whatever it is today now that you've been able to gather support for, you will be back here in 2 years trying to figure out how to do another $102 million tax cut. And you as Republicans and Democrats and people who represent this state need to look responsibly towards the future and know that you can do that with confidence and still fund our priorities. That ballot measure also is written in a different way than what the bill is that I brought to you today with the senators and the representatives, in the fact that we don't know if that ballot measure will necessarily comply with streamlined sales tax requirements. It's also written in a questionable manner that it's not sure if that ballot measure passes in 2 years, that it will allow our cities to be able to continue their city sales tax. The bill that you have in front of you right now allows those cities to collect their sales tax on groceries if they'd like to. It complies with streamlined sales tax. It benefits the residents who live here, and it is responsible looking towards the future, knowing that we can continue to address education and providers, that we can continue to fund our responsibilities and go after opportunities, but we also can make sure that we're representing the taxpayers. I've been in this Capitol for many years now, and I've seen every year as the debate goes on with lobbyists in the hallways, lobbyists who want education policy and funding, lobbyists who are arguing over what special project they should fund this year, what we should do for different needs that the state has. It's about time someone shows up for the taxpayer. That someone in this building recognizes that the only reason that we're in this building is because people in this state work hard and they're responsible and they plan for the future. It was interesting to me to see some of the proponents on the previous measure here that said that when I brought this bill and filed it at the beginning of this session, that it was irresponsible, that we didn't know if it was going to be sustainable. At $102 million ongoing, they sat here and said that it was a tax cut we just didn't know if we could maintain in the future. Yet, here they are just a couple of weeks later sitting here saying that going and lowering the rate is sustainable. The exact same dollar amount of ongoing commitment. I just ask you today to be honest with yourself. Let's have an honest debate and discussion about what is the best tax policy. For me, when I get up in the morning, the best policy is to always focus on the people who live here, the people who make the state run, to keep our perspective here on the ground, not in the noise that's discussed outside of people who get up and make our economy run. That's the families here. We should not be about picking winners and losers. We should not be about deciding tourists and people who visit our state should be prioritized over the people that get up and have their jobs here and raise their kids here. We should not be deciding how people spend their tax dollars. We should give them the freedom to use personal responsibility to keep more dollars in their pocket every week and decide how they want to spend it to benefit their families. I'm asking for your support on this bill today. I'd like you to send it to the House floor to continue the debate on this policy. It's the right thing for the state of South Dakota. It's good debate overwhelmingly. The public supports this tax cut over any others. And if you don't deal with this tax cut today, you definitely will be back here dealing with it in 2 years. And you will have to come back then and fix it because of the way that it's drafted, and it'll be on the ballot. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back my time, and thank you for giving me the privilege of speaking with all of you today.
Thank you, Governor Noem.
I love you too. Good evening. You look fantastic. Thank you for being here tonight. 3 years ago, during some of our country's darkest days in recent history, South Dakota inspired the nation by daring to boldly celebrate our God-given freedom. While leaders across the world used fear to manipulate, to lie, and to control people, we chose a different path. On July 3rd, we gathered at this nation's greatest monument, and we invited the world's strongest leader to join us. And President Donald J. Trump showed up. President Trump showed up, like he always does for the American people, and he has shown up here again tonight. Now, I've gotten lots of questions from people across the country about tonight's events. They want to know why. Why did you invite President Trump to come support the South Dakota Republican Party? They wanted to know, why would he waste his time in the middle of a presidential race to go to a small, insignificant state like South Dakota? Somebody really asked me that. That conversation went south pretty quickly. Another question they asked is President Trump going to pick you as the most popular and favorite governor? I said yes. So here are the facts. Chairman John Wick had this fantastic idea to bring Republicans in our state together, to rally us around our values and our principles. And I loved the idea. I told him that I would do everything I could to help him. We started discussing inviting all the candidates running to be President of the United States. Tim Scott was asked, and he declined. Vivek was invited, and he turned us down. Other candidates were asked, and all of them told us that they had better things to do. But when President Trump was invited to come be with you tonight, he said, "I will be there." You see, that's why people love President Trump. He doesn't listen to consultants. He doesn't listen to the media or the political elite to tell him what is important and what his priorities should be. To him, every American is worth fighting for. No one is better than anyone else. No one deserves to be treated differently than anyone else, and he will never forget about us, the little people in the little states that are the backbone of this country. He shows up for every American, and he fights for us every single day. Now, some people can't figure out his popularity. Why are people so loyal to him? I'm convinced it's because we have never seen anything or anyone like him ever before. And we've certainly never seen anyone like him serve in public office before. He is unapologetically himself. He's real, he's genuine, he is who he is, and he never pretends to be something that he's not. And those who hate America know that he will fight every single day to stop them from destroying this country. When I was first asked for your support, and when I stood with all of you and asked to serve as your governor, I talked about my vision for South Dakota. I believed our state could grow, that we could become stronger, expand businesses and industry, that we could pay down our debt, build stronger families, all while preserving our values and our way of life. We have done that here, and we didn't do it through more government control or by raising taxes. We did it by trusting our people and by giving them more opportunities to succeed. When the rest of the country was locking down and ordering people to stay home, we did the exact opposite. invited people to come to South Dakota. We used it as an opportunity to tell our story. We were a city on a hill during a very dark time, and we represented hope. We showed people and the country how to do better, how to be better. Many were threatened by what South Dakota has done the last several years. Here's why. While big government socialists want more control over you and your family, your money, and your life, we chose personal responsibility. We cut taxes, we cut regulations, we let families make the best decisions for themselves, and we have thrived. We have gone from flyover country to one of the fastest growing states in the nation. South Dakota's real GDP just grew a whopping 10.1%. Our personal incomes just went up by another 9.2%. Those are both top 5 in the nation. Our population has been growing up to 10 times the national average over the past several years. We are a beacon of freedom to the nation, and we have broken tourism records every year since the pandemic. We have grown our economy faster than any other state and faster than at any other time in South Dakota history. Now let me give you all a quick refresher on South Dakota's history. In January 2020, I stood in front of our legislature, and in my State of the State address, I declared South Dakota open for business. Just 2 months later, our first COVID cases came to South Dakota. I knew one thing: the only way that we were going to get through it was together. We made decisions based on the science, the facts, and the data, and the science did not support mandates or lockdowns. We asked South Dakotans to use common sense, and then we trusted them. We trusted them to use personal responsibility to make the best decisions for themselves and for their loved ones. And as a community, as a state, we went back to work. Other states were taking a very different approach. They ordered their citizens to shelter in place. They ordered businesses to lock down, ordered churches to close. Some even sent nursing home patients who had COVID back to their facilities. Those decisions were not leadership. They were made based on fear and control. Now, South Dakota, we focused on our facts. I respected my oath to the United States and the South Dakota constitutions. I respected our freedom, and I respected our people. Now, if Joe Biden had been president, he would have tried to stop me from protecting you. Thank God President Trump was in the White House at the time. He let me do my job, and the results have been absolutely incredible. Earlier this year, South Dakota became the first state in American history to reach a 1.8% unemployment rate. No state has ever had an unemployment rate that low. Our people understand the value of work and having a purpose, and they understand that we were created to serve each other. Incomes have been going up faster here than anywhere else. Women-owned businesses do better here than in virtually any other state. Folks are moving here in record numbers. Our birth rates are the highest in the country. Our new housing developments have led the nation. We have had historic tourism numbers, set new records in hunting and fishing licenses sold, and cut taxes, all while building historic revenues because of our economic growth. While other states were struggling with out-of-control crime and violence and hopelessness, South Dakota enforced our laws. We respected our law enforcement officers. We even saw declining mental health challenges, declining drug overdoses, and declining suicide rates. By embracing our faith and our freedom, and by working together, our people are happier. You see, I believe this is one of the main reasons why South Dakota is so attacked by those who want to see us fail. They will do anything and destroy anyone to get more control and power. We refused to comply. All we did in South Dakota is what Republicans have always said that they believed, but we did it, and it worked. Now that terrifies the liberals, because we have proof that our policies lift people up, that they help people, that they improve their opportunities for success. We don't have to speculate or guess or be philosophical about the benefits of our principles. We have proof that they work. 3 years ago on July 3rd at Mount Rushmore, I stood there to honor our nation. I quoted one of our 4 great leaders that are carved in stone on that mountain. I quoted my favorite president, Teddy Roosevelt. It is not the critic that counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and then comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best in the end knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat. That night I used those words to introduce our special guest who is with us this evening. I introduced him as someone who knows precisely what it means to brave the dangers in the arena, someone who strives valiantly, who knows great enthusiasms, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who has firmly and repeatedly stated his commitment to place Americans, American liberty, American safety, and the American Constitution before anything else. Let me be clear. There are many who choose not to be in the arena, many who take the easy path, who criticize, who don't show up for our party, our country, or our constitutional rights. They don't show up for you when it really matters. They didn't even show up here tonight to welcome a former president of the United States to South Dakota. A president who cared enough to come and support our state Republican Party and our great chairman, John Wick. Yes, maybe it is controversial to be here tonight. Maybe it wasn't convenient, but it is not the critic who counts. Thank all of you for being respectful, for being here for a man who shows up every day for each of us. May we all know the triumph of high achievement because of those like him who fight for freedom. It is a worthy cause. I was at the southern border just 2 weeks ago. Make no mistakes, it is a war zone, and President Biden's policies are inhumane. He is ignoring federal laws, he's perpetuating drug and human trafficking, he's undermining our national security. The only person in this presidential race who will fix that situation is President Trump. He started building and funded the wall. He instituted the Remain in Mexico policy, and it worked. He supports our allies, such as Israel and Taiwan. He understands that a strong America brings a safer world. I trust President Trump to use our military only when it's in America's best interests. I have been Commander-in-Chief of the South Dakota's National Guard. I have had South Dakota Guardsmen and women deployed every single day since I have been governor. Before that, I served on the House Armed Services Committee. I know how important American strength is on the world stage. I have seen it firsthand. I have seen President Trump take decisive action time and time again. He exhibits peace through strength. He destroys our enemies, and swiftly, without hesitation. And he understands that American men and women in uniform should only be deployed as a last result. The only person in the race that I trust to do what needs to be done on these issues is President Trump. I haven't seen these other candidates fight when it really mattered, when it was hard to do the right thing for our country. Now, some of them talk pretty tough, but where were they when the pandemic was raging? When leaders were taking away people's constitutional rights? Because the government told folks that they couldn't gather together, people lost their freedom of assembly. Because the government told people they couldn't go to church, people lost their freedom of religion. Because government censored what information could be shared and what couldn't, people lost their freedom of speech. Where were these candidates then? They were silent. They were cowering. Or worse yet, they were locking down their own people. They were pushing mandates. They were closing beaches, even arresting people for taking a spring break. Now, yes, I will be attacked for speaking the truth to all of you tonight. And yes, I expect that Joe Biden, these candidates, their political operatives, and the media will perpetuate ugly, hateful misinformation in an attempt to destroy me and my family because of our opinions. It's nothing new, and frankly, I'm getting pretty used to it. But all of us here tonight, we need to heed this warning in this well-known quote. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So listen, do something. Get in the arena. History cannot and it should not be rewritten. We must remember what has happened in the past, learn from it, and not allow those who abuse their power to ever perpetuate their harm again. To President Trump, tonight, Mr. President, my message is clear. It is an honor to have you with us here in South Dakota. These people here, these people are free. We are the strongest state in America because President Trump let me do my job. We seized that moment and we told our story. As you travel this great country, point to South Dakota as the example of what is possible. We just did here what Republicans have always said they believed, but we did it and it worked. We don't have to talk hypotheticals anymore. We kept our businesses open. We kept government out of people's lives. We cut taxes. Our government lives within its means. We have a surplus, not a debt. We fund our pensions. We take care of our veterans. We conserve our natural beauty without government mandates. We fight for true and honest education because we know how important it is to hand America off to our kids. We stand up for common sense, like fairness in girls' sports. We do our part to secure the border. We honor America's heroes. We stand for the flag, and we pray to the Almighty. And we sing the national anthem proudly. This is real America. South Dakota is the example that you should share with the rest of the country. You made America great again once. Let's do it again. It is my honor to present to you the man in the arena. He is a man of significance. He is the leader, the fighter that our country needs. He has my full and complete endorsement for President of the United States of America. I will do everything I can to help him win and save this country. Ladies and gentlemen, the 45th and the 47th President of the United States, Donald.
Thank you. Good afternoon, CPAC.
What an honor to be with all of you today. It's so great to be with all of you. Thank you for being true patriots and for loving America. You know me. You've met me before, and you know my background and my history. I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher from South Dakota who is now blessed to be the 33rd governor of the great state of South Dakota. Now, I was raised by a family who worked very hard. They solved problems. They believed in personal responsibility and not sitting around and waiting for the government to be the answer. I still love the outdoors, and most of the time working in the dirt and being comfortable in my jeans and wearing a ball cap, but as governor, my hours are often filled with something very different these days. I'm here today to let you know that 2024 should not be a year where we get hung up on party politics, where one-issue disagreements, or picking our leaders based on how long they've been in the U.S. Senate, or how many speeches they give each year. This election, the choice is clear. There are two kinds of people in this country right now. There are people who love America, and there are those who hate America. Those who hate America are working every day to destroy it. And let's be clear, Joe Biden is destroying America and taking away your freedoms. We can't just sit around complaining about it anymore. We need to do more. You know, I was recently asked an interesting question by a group that I had the chance to speak to. It was a leadership class, and they asked me a question from the audience and said, Governor Noem, how do you make your hard decisions? And I thought about it for a minute, and then I just said, you know what? It isn't hard. It's easy, because I know the foundation that I need to start from with every single decision that I make as governor. I went on to tell them a little bit about how when I first started to run for governor of our state, it was clear that it was going to be a very different race than I had ever run before. It was showing up in my polling that it was going to be an issue that I was a woman. Now, South Dakota had seen women lead before, of course, in business and in our state legislature and in Congress, but we had never had a female governor before. We'd never had a woman as the CEO of our state. It was a new idea. Now, I had spent my entire life in a man's world. I loved my dad. He was my best friend. I spent my days in the tractor, chasing cows, going on hunting trips with him. I was usually one of the very few women driving semis, hauling grain, showing up at farm policy meetings, serving in leadership in our state legislature, and even during my time in Congress, I was one of just a couple of women on the leadership team, making decisions on policy there. It was normal for me to be one of the few women in the room, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. But I remember the day that I was actually being sworn in to office as the first female governor of South Dakota. And much of that ceremony that day was dedicated to the historical nature of that event. I was being sworn in to office on the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in our state for the first time. And as the ceremony went on and the speakers continued to point out the significance of this 100-year anniversary and me taking the oath of office, it really started to hit me. For the first time, I thought to myself, wow, this is kind of a big deal. I looked around the Capitol Rotunda and I saw it filled with hundreds and hundreds of people, but for the first time, I started to notice all of the little girls in the room and all the women. And I realized that this really was going to be a part of history. They were getting to see somebody who looked like them take on a very different role. For the first time, I started to get nervous. And I thought to myself, I better not screw this up. As I stepped up to be sworn in by our Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, placed my hand on my dad's Bible, and I raised my right hand, I realized that I was only making two promises to the people of South Dakota. I was promising to uphold the Constitution of the great state of South Dakota and to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. Two promises. I can do that. So from that moment on, every decision that I make starts with asking the questions, is this constitutional? Do I have this authority as governor? What authority do I not have? What is the responsibility of the people? I think all of you know a little bit about the decisions that I've made as governor of our state. The last several years, we saw government leaders in other states use fear to control people. They used fear to promote their agenda of socialism and control. Now, that has not been our story in South Dakota. They took away, in other places, people's freedom of assembly. They took away their freedom of religion and their freedom of speech. And now they are threatening our state's rights to protect our people. Now, I was the only governor in this country who never once closed a single business. I never mandated anything to my people. I never told anyone that they couldn't go to church. We were the only state to turn down the elevated unemployment benefits because our people wanted to work. We trusted each other, and we got through our challenges together, and we are stronger because of it. Today, South Dakota is thriving. Because of the decisions that we've made in South Dakota, we broke the record for the lowest state unemployment rate in the history of America at 1.8%. We have unprecedented population growth, historic revenues, a AAA credit rating, a fully funded pension system, and we have paid off debts. We were the first state to eliminate fees for concealed carry permits in South Dakota, and we'll even pay for your federal background check. When the federal government tried to push the central bank digital currency, we were the first state in the nation to veto that bill and to say, no way, not here. We have built roads, bridges, dams, and even a railroad. Who builds railroads anymore? South Dakota does. We do. We put high-speed internet access across the entire state. We have the highest birth rate in the nation. People have hope. People are having babies, and I love it. We do not have an income tax. We have no personal property tax, and last year we passed the largest tax cut in our state's history by lowering our sales tax to 4.2%. Now, we are one of the few states whose suicide rates and our mental health challenges are going down. And we have the lowest drop in overdoses the last couple of years as well. What does all this say? This says that our people are happier. And they're happier because they're free. Leadership matters. I'm just going to say it. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they suck. And, to be honest with you, we shouldn't look to Congress for the answers either. The gridlock on Capitol Hill is not going to break in time to save America. We need a president who will. And I have always believed and supported the fact that our next president needs to be President Trump. We have incredible threats to our country right now. 2 years ago, I was at the southern border. I was actually the first governor to deploy National Guard troops down to the southern border to protect our country. Now other states are following our lead, and they're sending their National Guard as well. And make no mistake, an invasion of our country is happening, and our border is a war zone. It is the fault of Joe Biden and his violation of federal law. I was alarmed recently to hear Democrats encouraging Biden to federalize the National Guard under Title X in order to take them away from the control of governors and take away my ability to be their commander-in-chief of the National Guard. I recognized immediately the danger in this threat. If the president took that action to remove me as commander-in-chief of my South Dakota National Guard, it would be the first time in American history that a president paid soldiers to stand down, to not protect our country. So I went to the border the very next day. I offered to bring razor wire there so Texas would know that South Dakota stands with them, and I would load it in my truck and bring it. And I wanted them to know that we will defend our state's rights to protect our people and to protect them from a corrupt federal government. When I came home, I gave a joint address to my legislative session, and that very day our state legislature passed a resolution in support of securing our border and standing with Texas. South Dakota was the very first state legislature in this nation to take such an aggressive action, and I am so proud of them for doing that. This week, I announced that we will be deploying National Guard soldiers to the border for the 5th time. This time, they will be constructing a wall, a barrier, to keep those who want to come to this country illegally out. and to stop them from trafficking drugs, from proliferating the sex trafficking of our women and our children, and to stop the inhumanity of Joe Biden's border policies. Now, we have cartel presence right in our state of South Dakota because of that open border. My people are affected by it every day. I will do all I can in South Dakota to bring back peace and stability where Joe Biden has brought destruction and death. We know that China is taking advantage of the situation, that they're funneling military-aged men into our country, and many dangerous criminals and terrorists from other countries who hate us are making their way here too. Some countries are emptying out their prisons and their mental health institutions to send their responsibilities to us to handle. These countries are infiltrating us to destroy us, and they're doing it from the inside. Now, I saw this coming. I was the first governor in the country to ban TikTok for state government devices. I know how China is using that app to collect our data, to spy on our people, and to manipulate our opinions and our ideas. Since then, dozens of states and even the federal government followed my lead and took action. Apparently, Joe Biden gets a pass for his campaign, but whatever, Joe. We need to face the facts. Joe Biden is not fit to be president, and Kamala is no backup plan. They have facilitated communist policies, socialist programs into our American democracy. It is not the government's job to simply do everything for people. It is the job of the government to empower people to do things for themselves. So we have a clear choice. I was one of the first people to endorse Donald J. Trump to be our next president. Last year, when everyone was asking me if I was going to consider running for president, I said no. Why would you run for president if you can't win? I didn't say that to be nice. I said it because it was a fact. No one we knew could beat Donald J. Trump. We've known that for over a year, that he's the only person who had the support to be the Republican nominee. So why did all these other people and candidates get into the race? For themselves? For personal benefit? For a spotlight for a period of time? But it did not and it does not strengthen our country if conservatives are not united enough to recognize that we need to win. We need a fighter. We need someone who doesn't give up, who has never quit on us, so don't you quit on him. President Trump, he broke politics in 2016. He just did. And I think that's a good thing because he's real. He's not perfect. None of us are. But he cares about you. And what I love about him the most is that he doesn't think he's better than you. So luckily, we are not going back to the good old days of the Romneys and the Cheneys. And the Republican Party is much bigger than that now. We are filled with blue-collar workers, many cultures, perspectives, and viewpoints. But most importantly, we all love America. And we realize what a gift that this country is. This country is the greatest experiment in humankind. And if we lose it on our watch, where will we go? Where is there another country that is better or offers us more opportunity? It just doesn't exist. So for me, there is no going back. I'm all in. And you need to be too. We need to look for our leaders outside of the swamp. Nobody turns to D.C. for the solutions. Nothing meaningful gets accomplished here. It is governors who have had to lead. And I have seen governors make bad decisions and devastate their states, and we have seen governors who did the right thing. Now, as you know, for me personally, I slammed my foot on the gas. I promoted freedom, personal responsibility in our Constitution. And today, South Dakotans are happy. They're making more money. They're making decisions for their children's education. They're pursuing the American dream in safe communities. There's a famous quote from Margaret Thatcher where she said, "God needs no faint hearts for his ambassadors." Well, with your help, we can always do more. If America wants to be great again, I'd suggest you take a look at South Dakota and see all that we have achieved. and then vote for President Trump. I want to thank you for your dedication to freedom. You are inspirational. I want you to leave here and go be hopeful and be happy. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be with all of you today, and thank you, Congressman, for that very kind introduction. You are a wonderful friend, and you're doing such a great job, maybe because you stole half of my staff and kept them when I left the Hill. No, but you're a wonderful representative for South Dakota. Thank you for caring so passionately for all of our people. You know, Chairman Thompson, I also have the honor of having one of my former chairmen on this committee sit in front of me today. Chairman Lucas was my chairman as I served here in the House of Representatives and had the chance to do 2 farm bills, but serving under his leadership on this committee was a special honor for me, and I loved being a member of his team as we put together farm policy, which I always refer to as food policy for the United States of America. So it's wonderful to see you again, Chairman Lucas, and I look forward to continuing to receive your advice and wisdom over the years. Ranking Member Scott and members of the committee, thank you so much for letting me be here with you today to discuss this topic. As a former member of this committee, I know it very well, that each day that you protect not only our nation's food supply, but you also are stewards of our land. And it is a treasure for us to be able to do that each and every day. I come before you today and sit as the 33rd governor of South Dakota. My home state is known for its gorgeous Black Hills, its rolling plains, but also iconic Mount Rushmore. We have a lot to be proud of, and if you haven't come to visit us, you probably should, because it is beautiful. Agriculture is our #1 industry in our state, but tourism is our 2nd largest industry. It's incredibly important to our people that our land stay in good shape and we continue to produce. This year is special to me because this is the 30th year that I have worked on agriculture policy. I have spent my lifetime working on policy, not just being a farmer and a rancher and raising my family on the land, but also being involved in meetings. At just the age of 22, my dad was killed in an accident on our family farm, and I got angry when I found out how our family was going to be hit tragically by the death tax. I started showing up at meetings to talk about policy and how it impacted small farms. At that time, the U.S. Senate Majority Leader was Tom Daschle, who was a Democrat. And I ended up him appointing me to serve on the Farm Service Agency State Committee, which is the committee that oversees all the federal farm programs in the state of South Dakota. I did that for many years as a young wife and mother, and also as a farmer and rancher running a large operation in our state. So I was heavily involved in the implementation of federal farm programs in our state, making sure they worked for all of our ranchers there and that they were as flexible as possible to give them the freedom to choose how they ran their farms and to do it very well. I also served on many different commissions and task forces out here in Washington, D.C. during those years to help disadvantaged farmers, people that were in tough situations and different critical situations. And as the general manager of our business operations, I ran our farm for many decades. I was first elected to our state legislature in 2006 and became the assistant majority leader in the House. While there, I rewrote our agriculture property tax system. I ended up running for Congress, was elected, served on this committee, and we worked on 2 farm bills while I served on this committee, also served on natural resources, on the Armed Services Committee, Education and Workforce Committee, and then ended on Ways and Means Committee when we did tax reform, and was very proud to see that signed into law. In 2018, when I ran for governor in our state, and I won and then was reelected again last year, or in 2022, and I'm in my 2nd term now. I tell you all of this because I think it's important for you to know that my heart is with the land and it is with our people, but when it comes to policy, that I know what I'm talking about. And I know it because I live it. Today, our focus of this committee is the danger that China poses to American agriculture. Over the years, I have witnessed this hostile communist country work to systematically take over our food supply chain. They have decades ago started buying our fertilizer companies, controlling our ability to access fertilizer, bring it into the United States. Then I watched them buy up our chemical companies as I worked on implementation of programs and policies at our state level and at the federal level. I watched us as we sold citizenship to Chinese communist members of the Communist Party for investment into our processing systems. And now most of our processing facilities are owned by the Communist Party or Chinese government. Now they are coming for our land. And when they buy up our land, they will complete their
chain of control of our food supply. Between 2010 and 2020, the Chinese Communist Party's holdings of ag land increased by 5,300%. Reports now show that China owns about 384,000 acres of U.S. ag land, valued at over $2 billion. This should be alarming to all of us. USDA admits that this may not even account for all of the land that they own because there's very little track of foreign interests that are involved in these large transactions. In fact, there's very little reporting that happens at the state or the federal level, and little consequences for allowing countries who hate us from owning our land. Just this past summer, we had members of the Communist Party contact our state government and want to come and visit to our processing facilities, see our farms, and visit South Dakota. We declined all of those meetings. But just within days, we received a phone call from the State Department telling us that those were Chinese spies. They were there to steal our intellectual property, to steal our genetics, and wanted to debrief us if we had met with them. Thank God we did not. We were told they were there to help improve our trade relations, that they were there to improve our business and our exports, and instead they were there to steal from the United States of America. So the threat is very real to us every single day, what China is doing, and they have a 1,000-year plan to become the world dominating power in the world, and the only thing standing in their way is America. Just this past summer, it was very clear to me when those Chinese spies were in our state that China wants to control us, and they want to do that by controlling our food supply. The Chinese Communist Party is not our friend. They're not our partner, and they're not our ally. They're our enemy. And they're a rapidly expanding national security threat that can't be ignored. So let me be clear. They are buying up our entire food supply chain, and when America can't feed itself and we rely on other members of another country to feed us, it becomes a national security issue. The country that feeds us will control us. And let me remind you why we do a farm bill every year. And I'm well aware that you have a priority to get that done, and I'm looking forward to getting a farm bill done because that is the safety net for our farmers out there. In the past, the farm bill has always been a bipartisan issue, and it should continue to be a bipartisan issue. I had the opportunity to work on 2 of them, and it is simply a safety net for our farmers. It is important, and America decided years ago that we needed to have a farm bill to ensure that every family in this country had a safe and had an affordable food supply, that they had the ability to go to a grocery store and to put food on the table for their families, and that if a farmer had a good year, he could pay his bills, but if he had a bad year, he could lose everything. And we didn't want to have a drought or a flood or something happen that caused us to lose all of our small family farms and allow us to lose the ability to feed ourselves. Every family in this country recognizes the importance of a farm bill. I know you do too, and I'm looking forward to you getting one completed to make sure that we continue to feed ourselves in this country. The farm bill should be designed to help farmers and not environmental extremists. I hope that you'll continue to focus on making sure that we are working as a conservationist myself. I'm committed to protecting the abundance of our natural resources in my state, but so-called climate-smart agriculture dictated by the Biden administration does not help farmers. And it does not help us put food on the table or conserve our natural resources. We want wildlife habitat solutions that meets the needs of the people and the states that best serve this country and our ability to feed ourselves and protect ourselves. The Farm Bill manages risk, and it is a safety net, and I hope that you can get that done. Recent media reports show that the largest Chinese holder of American ag land is shipping food and medical supplies to China to be stockpiled by the Chinese military. We all saw when China purchased land in North Dakota that they claimed was for a corn processing plant, that there wasn't going to be enough corn in that area to supply that plant, and that it was just miles from a military installation. They were purchasing that land on purpose for national security reasons, and that is why I've made it a priority in my state to ensure that that doesn't happen on my watch. In South Dakota, we worked for 2 years to make sure that we had a bill in place that would make sure we know who's buying our land and that it wasn't going to be from a country that hated us. China would never allow us to go to their country and buy land in their country. They don't even allow their own people to buy their land. There's no reason we should allow them to come into our country and buy our land, and especially not close to our military installations. South Dakota is the home to Ellsworth Air Force Base. It's the home of the B-1 bomber that has protected this country for the last 50 years. It's also home to the MQ-9 Reaper drones, which are in operation protecting us as well. But it will be the first home of the B-21s, which will be the bombing platform that will protect this country for the next 50 years. And it's incredibly important that we stop China and that we make sure other evil foreign governments don't come in and have the opportunity to buy up land next to these military installations. When we talk about food policy, please talk about it from a national security standpoint. It is important that we grow our own food, that we produce it here, and that we're doing it in a way that protects the United States of America. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Now, please recognize Chairman Gallagher. Begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Scott, members of the committee. What an incredible opportunity to be able to discuss the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party.
We are committed to securing our state. We're committed to honoring the men and women in uniform who make that possible. South Dakota respects our law enforcement. We've proven that in our actions and also in our words. We recruited out-of-state law enforcement officers to move to a state where they would be respected. It isn't just our law enforcement officers who go above and beyond the call of duty. I hear story after story of incredible South Dakotans who step up every single day. Stories like the staff at the Avera Adventera nursing home in Salem, who brought residents into an inner room at the nurses' station when the derecho hit their facility this spring. Those individuals had to physically hold the doors shut in their bare hands to keep them from being ripped off their hinges. And when the storm abated, everything on the other side of those doors were gone. These nursing home employees may have felt like they were just doing their job, but they saved so many lives that day. The staff of that nursing home is here with us all today. Would you all please stand and remain standing for just a minute? Stand up. We'll give you a round of applause, but don't sit down. I want them to stay standing for a little bit. When I was there right after the storm, I was shocked by what I saw. I had never seen a situation where people literally had to stand there and hold a flimsy door shut to protect people in the middle of the derecho tornado situation, and they did it to protect their residents and literally risked their lives to do it. It's incredible the devastation that happened and what they did that day. It's a testimony to the people of South Dakota. And I've got one more individual that I'd like to talk about today as well. Mark Cook works in construction. He has a wife and 5 kids. And one day he was driving through a torrential downpour when he saw a car that was flipped on its side in the median. He pulled over, he climbed into the flipped vehicle. He found a woman who was in shock from that crash. The car was filling up with water, and the woman was hanging from her seatbelt. Mark cut her loose. He held her out of the water, calmed her down, and held the car door open above his head until emergency responders could arrive. Now, Mark is a hero. He was a hero that day, but he's also a hero in uniform. Mark is a staff sergeant in the South Dakota Air Guard, and he was driving on his way to drill when he stopped and helped that woman, potentially saving her life. His job in the Guard is to keep our nation safe and to protect our freedoms. But he could have just kept driving that day. He didn't. He pulled over, he stepped up, and Staff Sergeant Cook and his family are here today. Would you please stand as well to be recognized and be thanked for your heroism? Stay standing. Today I want to honor both the staff at Avera, Adventera, and Salem, and Staff Sergeant Mark Cook with the Governor's Award for Heroism. Thank you so much for being incredible witnesses to the extent to which South Dakotans will go above and beyond to protect and to serve each other. Thank you and congratulations on this award, and thank you for all that you do for your communities. Our state is safer because of men and women who answer the call of duty without being asked. I'm proud to be a South Dakotan because of people like all of you. Thank you for setting the example. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's the state of our state. For 4 years now, we have made South Dakota the state where anyone can come here and build their American dream. We've strengthened families, we've secured this state, and we have built here in the last 4 years exactly what our founding fathers envisioned when they created our nation. And the founders of our state who enshrined the phrase, "Under God, the people rule." We are just getting started. In 1790, less than 1 year after taking office as the President of the United States, George Washington delivered his first State of the Union address. Now, some people think it was the best State of the Union ever delivered. It was also the shortest, so that might have been a reason why. But President Washington delivered an important point that I think we should all remember today. The welfare of our country is the great object to which our cares and efforts ought to be directed. I shall derive great satisfaction from our cooperation with you in the pleasing, though arduous task of ensuring to our fellow citizens the blessings for which they have the right to expect from a free, efficient, and equal government. That is still our task today, to ensure a free, an efficient, and an equal government for the people of South Dakota. I look forward to working with all of you to get that done, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great state of South Dakota.